Hello friends, today I thought it'd be fun to bring you along for a full day of reading where I'm showing you what I'm currently reading, how many pages I actually read in a day, and also discuss my reading habits because sometimes I do get questions about how I fit reading into my day or how many pages I'm reading per day. So I thought now would be a fun chance to show that as well as to discuss some of the very peculiar but highly enjoyable novels I've been reading lately. Now when it comes to my reading habits, I generally will read for about 2 to 3 hours per day, broken up between 3 different sections. So I have my morning reading time, my midday, which I'm getting into right now, and then my evening. Now the morning is when I get the bulk of my reading done, and I'll usually dedicate that time to some specific novel. It doesn't always have to be a 1,600-page, 2-volume book like The Demons, but just some book that has a bit more intellectual density, it's a bit more verbose or intimidating, or just requires more focus. I'll leverage the morning for that just because that time is always fixed, where the other reading periods sometimes can get moved around or truncated for whatever reason. So the morning is usually when I'll dedicate to a specific novel. And at the moment, that novel happens to be The Demon. So here's a little bit of a recap from this morning. Just finished reading this morning and got in 22 pages. I don't really stress any page count because that can vary a lot depending on the size of the book, the material, the writing style, the text size. All these different factors can change how fast or your pace of reading a specific book. But generally each morning when I read for about an hour, in this book I'm getting anywhere from like 20 to 30 pages each morning. And it's worth mentioning that a key way that I set aside more time for reading is getting up very early in the morning. I get up at 3:50 a.m. every morning, and that's for a few different reasons. One is I'm just a morning person. I feel much more productive and lively earlier in the day, so the more hours I can get early in my day rather than unproductive, lazy hours later in the day is better for me. And the other thing is it's so peaceful in the morning. No one else is awake. It's dark. It's quiet. And that's when I feel like I can concentrate best and really enjoy my reading before I get to the stress of the day, the notifications, the phone calls, the emails, all of that. So if you're struggling to set aside time in your day, and this goes for working out or anything important to you in your life, try and just wake up an hour earlier if you can. That will require you to go to bed an hour earlier just to make sure you're getting in good sleep. But wake up an hour earlier. You have a little bit more time to your morning, time to your day. Add in the reading, add in the workout, add in whatever's important to you. And it's just a nice way to squeeze in a little bit more reading to your day. Now, as far as the book itself, The Demons has been quite an interesting book to read. It is my current big read, so to speak, that I read each morning. I like to focus on a big book in the morning and then some shorter or mid-sized works that I'll read midday and later in the evening. But The Demons, I'm about halfway through volume 1, so that means I'm like 336 pages into this edition, and it's very interesting. It reminds me very much of Dostoevsky. It's very Dostoevskian in the way that it's narrated, in the way that it has a very expansive character list. I actually tabbed the pages over here that outline all the characters. It's like 5 pages of characters. Not all of them are important, but it is a very sprawling list of characters. You're going through different environments and settings, and I'd say that the first few chapters had me not confused, but it took me a while to get my bearings and familiarity with the characters, with the personality, because just like Dostoevsky, the characters are very well and thoroughly developed. You're not just getting their names or descriptions, who they're related to. You're getting a very vivid and just highly detailed description of their behaviors, the way that they view the world, the way that they think, act, the way that they may behave in a certain situation. Their predilections, their weird tics, all these things are described by the narrator in a very fun way that makes the characters feel quite quirky and lively. And also the narrator does this self-reflexive way where he is breaking the fourth wall. He's speaking to the reader. He's acknowledging that he's telling the story. So all those elements make it quite like a Dostoevsky type of novel, which of course the title is very reminiscent of Dostoevsky's book. And then when it comes to the story itself, there hasn't been a clear plot that has emerged yet, but so far I've just been drawn in and intrigued by the quirks and the peculiarities of the characters. There seem to be these two forming groups, the crowd, which includes a number of male characters along with Schlagenberg's sister Quap, and then on the other side you have these corpulent females and wives that gather together at this cafe to gossip and talk about a whole host of things. And the last note to make is that the writing style and the narrative is very familiar, it flows well, the descriptions of the characters, like I mentioned, are not super direct. Instead, he'll use some kind of metaphor or analogy to describe the behavior or the way that someone acts rather than telling you directly, which makes it quite fun and also just a bit more vivacious. The characters feel more real in that sense. There's also comedic timing, or not comedic timing, but comedic retorts and dialogue mixed throughout, especially when it comes to the fat females, which was one of the original working titles for the book. And then there's also plenty of foreshadowing in the book, like on this page early on that says, quote, "For the whole is contained in the smallest segment of anyone's life story. Indeed, we may even say that it is contained in every single moment. Start up your dredging machine and you take it all up, no matter whether ecstasy, despair, boredom, or triumph happens to fill the moving buckets on their endless chain of ticking seconds." Or there's moments where the narrator interjects and speaks directly to the reader, like I mentioned, like on page 229, where the phone rings and disrupts this argument going on at the moment, or creates this tension. He says, quote, "The reader will understand that at this point the telephone had to ring." So it's a very perhaps whimsical is the way you would describe it, way that the story is told, but really enjoying it so far. I have a long ways to go on maybe a fourth of the whole book because I'm halfway through volume 1. I still got volume 2, but yeah, 22 pages this morning. So as you can tell, I'm really enjoying the demons and slowly chewing away at it. And it is such a long book, so I'll be with it for many weeks to come. But with that said, sometimes with the morning book, if I really am enjoying it, or the midday book is quite short, I will double up and read this in the evening. But generally, I'll just stick to the morning as the time to read the thicker doorstopper novel that I'm working on. But now switching gears, the other book I'm reading at this time is 19 Stulyev, or The 12 Chairs by Ilya Elf and Yevgeny Petrov. Generally, I'll read 2 books at a time. I'll read that bigger novel in the morning and then a more mid-sized or shorter work midday. So that's what I'm about to get into right now. So I just finished my midday read and I got in 29 pages of the 12 Chairs. And before I discuss the book, I want to say real quick, the way that I read, or like my habits, my general reading schedule, is I'll read for about an hour in the morning, as I just shared with you, and then I'll read for about 40 minutes to sometimes 60 minutes midday. Fortunately, I work from home, so I'm able to kind of take a midday break that functions not only as a lunch break and a break from work, but I shoe in reading as well. So that's why I can kind of range from 30 to 60 minutes. And that's when I'll break out a different book, usually a shorter read. This happens to be like a 40 or 400 page-ish novel. Generally, I like to keep it in the 300 or less range, but just something that has a different vibe, that's maybe a little bit of a less intense or casual read, short stories, novellas, anything like that, that's going to be less daunting than the morning book that I know is going to take me multiple weeks, potentially multiple months to read. Something I can work through a little bit quicker is just nice to kind of keep the flow and not feel like I'm stuck reading the same book day after day after day. Anyway, to the 12 Chairs, this has been an absolute delight to read. I thought I would enjoy it. I knew it was a Soviet comedy that would probably evoke some laughter from me. But man, it has lived up to the hype and so much more. I'm so glad I found this copy because it seems so tricky to find this book in print. I think it's really only been in print from the Northwestern University Press. So if you can get your hands on a copy, I think it's available on Amazon, but otherwise I highly recommend it because this story is just so laughable. It feels like you're watching some kind of satirical movie or some comedy, some spoof or parody-like movie when you're watching this. So to describe the plot a little bit, you're following this registry clerk, Ippolit, who works at a funeral house. And he, on his mother-in-law's deathbed, she tells him that she's sewn these jewels into the furniture. And this was quite common during the Soviet days, where if you had fear that you were going to be raided by the Bolsheviks or by the secret police, the NKVD, the Cheka, these different police organizations, a lot of times people would have to hide their valuables, and so they would sew them into furniture or hide them in different creative ways. And so his mother-in-law tells him that they are sewn into one of the 12 chairs at their house, and this sends him on a wild and ridiculous adventure trying to locate all the different chairs that have been dispersed or sold off and find which one has the jewel so that he can be rich. And along with him, he's accompanied by this audacious, quote, smooth operator named Ostap Bender, who is quite clearly the hero of the novel. He's the one really leading the action. And the novel just, it also introduces this whole cast of characters that really paints a picture of the caricatures of the time of Soviet Russia within the 20s and the 30s. And the novel, as I said, is simply a delight. It's such a joy to read. It's hilarious at many different moments. I won't tell you the jokes because, one, it's hard, whether it's a novel, a movie, a comedic bit, it's hard to kind of recite a joke and it actually land the same way. You kind of need the context. But more so too, I don't want to spoil any of the jokes within here, but I can't recommend this enough. If you have enjoyed Russian works, or even if you're just looking for a novel that is a little bit more lighthearted and adventurous, paced well, and will create some laughter for you, The 12 Chairs has impressed. I'm about halfway through it. And maybe later today I'll be more like 2/3. But I've been reading about 40 to 80 pages a day. I'll read this again in the evening and give probably another little update and synopsis on the day. But I will likely make a video on this book once I finish it, just because it has been such a pleasure to read it. But I plan to watch the Soviet film adaptation to this book because I've heard great things about that as well. And I think it would be fun to kind of juxtapose the book and the film and discuss it as a whole. So that's the deal with this book. I think my wife is about, what are you, pages from finishing your book?
Last page.
Last page. So I'm interrupting her, and then the dogs are just snoozing. But that's it for reading right now, and I'll catch you guys in a few hours after I finish work and read this evening. All right, so it's the end of the day, about to go to bed, but before I do, we're gonna read for about another hour and see if I can get into part 3. I think I'm like 30-ish pages away from part 3 of this book, so we'll see if I get there. But this morning I read 22 pages, midday 29 pages, so I think that puts me at 51 pages for the day, just to give you a little count there. So we'll see if I get into the 80, 90-ish range. But yeah, generally I will read in those 3 sections of the day, like I mentioned, the morning, midday, and then after dinner. I'll see if I can read for about another hour or so. And you know, some days I'll shoe in some extra reading if I have time, if I'm out and about, if I'm at a coffee shop or something like that. But generally it does fall into those sections. So I'm curious whether you guys do that too. Do you have sections of the day that are not necessarily dedicated reading times, but that have the option for reading? Or do you kind of just fit it in and shoe it in whenever you get the free time or whenever you get the chance? What about you, babe? Do you like to have your reading times blocked off as like, okay, I'm reading from blank to blank or this time, or do you like having it more just kind of sporadic?
Probably like sectioned off time. You know me, I like my Google Calendar.
We've both talked about it, how it's kind of nice to have those, like a Pomodoro timer where you only read for like 45 minutes and then take a 15-minute break. It kind of helps with, I feel like, the ADHD we have from phones where you can just focus in for that period of time.
I do like setting a timer.
Yeah, but anyway, she's reading, what, a retelling of Little Mermaid?
It's a fractured fairy tale.
Fractured Fairy Tale.
Yeah.
And I'm reading the 12 Chairs. So I'll recap and wrap up this video after I read. Alright, so I finished reading for the night. Got in about 26 pages. I did break into part 3. So it leaves me with about 100 pages left to finish this book. I'll probably finish it probably 2 days from now. So not tomorrow. But overall, I think that rounds off the day at 77 pages. I'd say that's like an average amount that I would reach per day, anywhere from like 70 to 90, with some days where I fit in more reading, might be reaching into the 100+ range. But I'm very curious. Let me know in the comments down below whether you do page count or hours. Generally, how much are you reading per day? And also, do you structure your reading? Like, do you set aside specific times of day, or do you just again, kind of go with the flow of the day, have a flexible schedule, and just fit it in whenever you get the chance. Maybe whenever you put the kids to bed or drop them off at school, or have a break at work, something like that. Let me know, because I'd be quite curious to know about your reading habits. But that's it for this video. As far as the 12 chairs, still in love with this book. The characters are larger than life. The story itself is quite humorous and fascinating, but also there's all these side quests with different characters that really add color to the story and paint a good picture of Soviet life as well. So really enjoying it, look forward to finishing it, and that is it for this video. So like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.